At the same time, we're wondering, Mr. Choi-ho, that do you personally have any projects that you felt that really impressive or very concerned?
Yeah, I think the beautiful thing about development, Yuan, is that you change people's lives for the better. Mm-hmm. For example, Brazil has received investments from the new development bank so as to allow for the bigger solar energy plant in Latin America. India has received investments from the new development bank to allow for faster connections on railways so that a couple who is coming back home from work can spend more time with their children. In China, you have major utilization of the power of wind to make cleaner energy. And one of the beauties about it is that these examples stand out and they can be used for other developing nations as well. So sometimes a solution that works in China or in India or in Brazil can actually inspire other development projects across the development world. And I think, you see, this is going to be more and more the case because one of the chief characteristics of the global scenario that we have out there, Yuan, is that the big emerging economies, I always like to make this comparison between the traditional G7, whereas if you take into account the so-called E7, the E7 by purchasing power parity comparison is already bigger than the G7. So the projects that you approve in terms of development here, they have a bigger impact because you're also talking about big territories, big populations.
Well, President Choi-ho, since you mentioned the comparison between the E7, which are the most important emerging markets, and also the fastest growing emerging markets. So how do you see the role of these countries, especially the BRICS, in the future economic landscape?
Well, I think the geoeconomic meridian of the world, the geoeconomic Greenwich of the world is indeed shifting towards big emerging economies. If you gauge the actual contribution that these countries have towards the formation of global demand and global growth, it is indeed robust. I think the most important contributions to global expansion, economically speaking, will continue to be from emerging markets. And look at a tough year like 2022, where there is a lot of talk about recession, likely recession in Europe and in the United States. The emerging markets, the big emerging economies will still see growth that can be considered as robust. And I think this signals very clearly towards the future of where the, once again, geoeconomic meridian will be going by. And I think this also shows how the new development bank, an institution that is positioning itself to become the premier development bank for the emerging economies, is really in the right niche.
新兴经济体的重要代表正是金砖国家。据统计，21世纪头20年，整个新兴市场国家和发展中国家的经济总量占全球 GDP 的比重从24%提升到40%以上。作为领头羊，金砖5国如今的经济总量占世界的近1/4，人口占世界总人口的约42%。货物贸易占全球的18%，对世界经济增长贡献率高达50%。2021年，金砖5国实现7.6%的经济增速，远高于5.5%的世界平均水平。可以说，金砖国家是名副其实引领世界经济增长的最主要动力源。2022年6月23日。以构建高质量伙伴关系，共创全球发展新时代为主题的金砖国家领导人第14次会晤成功举行。再次担任金砖国家主席国的中国，全年将主办170多场各领域金砖活动，众多金砖加活动吸引了50多个非金砖国家的参与，充分展现出这个合作机制的强大磁力。